Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever paused to think about the incredible stories hidden within the very words we use, like every single day?
Hmm.
It's truly astonishing how much history, how much culture, and even, surprising humor is packed into seemingly simple vocabulary.
It really is, like tiny time capsules, as you said.
Exactly.
And today we're diving deep into a fascinating segment of that linguistic tapestry words, starting with the letter D.
Right.
Our mission, if you will, is to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge from this rich source, revealing how meanings shift, how sounds echo across centuries, and how history etches itself onto our lexicon in ways we often don't even realize.
Think of it as your personal shortcut to being truly well-informed about words you might have taken for granted your entire life. Like, ever wondered why calling someone a dunce carries such a specific sting?
Right. Or the dashboard.
Or how a dashboard ended up in your car. Yeah. Get ready for some genuine aha moments that will, I think, profoundly change how you listen to and speak English.
Hmm.
You'll never look at a D word the same way again, probably.
We'll explore powerful prefixes that fundamentally alter meaning, trace the wild, wild journeys of words from ancient concepts to modern slang, and uncover unexpected connections that tie seemingly disparate terms together.
Uh-huh.
What stands out to you when you simply consider words beginning with D? Perhaps a favorite expression, or maybe a word whose origin has always puzzled you.
All right. Our journey today begins with something fundamental yet incredibly powerful. The transformative nature of prefixes.
Foundational stuff.
Exactly. These tiny additions at the beginning of a word aren't just decorative. They can completely flip a word's meaning, give it entirely new nuances, or even send it on a wild semantic journey.
Yeah, they're like little engines of meaning.
We're talking about prefixes like d, dis, dia, and dis. They're linguistic powerhouses, each carrying a range of meanings that fundamentally reshape the words they attach to, often denoting things like reversal, separation, movement, or difficulty.
Absolutely. It's truly incredible how these Latin and Greek roots are still so actively shaping our language today, influencing thousands of words, often without us even realizing their ancient lineage.
You just sort of absorb them.
You do, and that's a key point. These prefixes are like the foundational architectural elements of our vocabulary. Understanding them doesn't just help you decipher individual words, it provides a framework for understanding how language itself operates,
Oh.
how it constructs complex meanings from these fundamental building blocks. It gives you a deeper insight into the, let's say, the logic of English.
Right. Makes sense. First up, let's unpack the incredibly versatile prefix D-Day. It's a real linguistic chameleon, isn't it?
It really is.
Depending on the context, it can signify down, away from, or even completely, and sometimes, most intriguingly, a full reversal of action. It's truly a linguistic workhorse you see everywhere once you start looking.
Absolutely. Take decapitate, for example. A bit grim, but clear.
Yeah, very clear.
It comes from the Latin caput, meaning head. So the D tier literally expresses removal.
Off with the head.
The meaning is perfectly literal, to remove the head. It's a stark, clear example of the away from or removal sense of D, leaving no room for ambiguity.
Got it.
Or consider denude, which means to completely bare. Here, nudere means to bear, and the D intensifies it to completely.
Ah, so it strengthens it there.
Exactly. It's about stripping something entirely bare, leaving nothing covered, like a landscape denuded by a forest fire or something. This isn't just about removal, it's about a complete and utter bearing.
Okay, and then there's defunct. That word's journey is particularly fascinating, I find. It comes from the Latin defunctus, which was the past participle of defungi, meaning carry out or finish. So the D here seems to express a kind of completion, but one that leads to, well, stopping.
Yes, and what's fascinating here is how that initial sense of finish or carried out, as in one has finished their life's duty, evolves to mean dead.
Right.
And then eventually to our current, more common meaning of no longer in use or in fashion by maybe the mid-18th century. This semantic chain reaction from finished to dead to obsolete isn't just about one word's journey. It illustrates how language continually reflects and redefines our understanding of existence and usefulness.
That makes sense.
It's a linguistic fossil, almost, of how we perceive decline and the end of something. When a product is defunct, it's not just out of date, it's effectively dead in the marketplace.
Yeah. So it's not just a word. It's like a commentary on obsolescence. What about deprave? Where does that fit in?
Depreve. It comes from Latin privare, meaning bereave, with D meaning away completely.
Okay.
The early sense was actually quite formal, meaning depose from office, like taking away someone's position.
Oh, yeah, I think I knew that.
And then it shifted to the modern meaning of taking something away, making someone go without. It still carries that core idea of taking something away from someone or something, but the context broadened considerably.
So it generalized.
Precisely. It moved from a specific legal or political act of removal to a more general sense of loss or lacking something essential.
Okay. And then there's define, where D expresses completion. You mentioned that. From Latin finire, finish, the early sense meant bring to an end.
Yes, but it's really about fully setting bounds or limits to something, giving it a complete and distinct boundary.
Like drawing a line around it.
Exactly. It's not just ending, it's about making something finite and clear, giving it a complete and precise explanation or description. To define something is to put a complete linguistic fence around it, marking its precise boundaries.
I like that, a linguistic fence. And demolish. That seems pretty straightforward reversal.
It is, from Latin molere, construct, with D clearly expressing reversal. So to demolish is literally to deconstruct or take down a mass or moles. It's a direct opposite of building.
Taking it apart.
It's the undoing of construction, a powerful image that perfectly embodies the reversal aspect of D.
Right.
And deploy, a word often used in military or strategic contexts, meaning move into position, also has a surprising root that hints at that unfolding action.
Unfolding. How so?
It comes from French déployer, from Latin displiquer or depliquer, meaning unfold.
Ah.
So to deploy is literally to unfold something into position, revealing it and spreading it out, whether it's troops arranging themselves on a battlefield or a company deploying new software.
Or even like deploying an argument, spreading it out.
Precisely. It's about taking something folded or held back and spreading it out for use or for view.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, dis is another big one, right? Often used for negation or reversal. But here's where it gets really interesting sometimes, surprisingly, for intensification.
Yes, that always trips people up.
It really keeps you on your toes with English etymology.
It does. The intensifier role of disses is particularly intriguing because it goes against the more common understanding of negation or separation. But let's start with a classic negation example. Disaster.
Okay.
This is an excellent example of dis-expressing negation. It comes from Italian disastro, which literally means an ill-starred event, combining dis with astro, meaning star.
Ill-starred. Wow. That immediately makes me think of ancient beliefs about fate in the cosmos. So a disaster was literally like a bad horoscope or bad stars.
Pretty much. This raises an important question. It vividly illustrates how deeply ingrained astrological beliefs once were in cultural understanding. A disaster wasn't just bad luck. It was literally an unstarred or ill-fated event, directly caused by adverse stellar influence.
So it reveals a whole worldview.
Exactly. A worldview where cosmic forces dictated earthly fortunes. It shows how intertwined early language was with prevailing beliefs, embedding fundamental assumptions right into our vocabulary.
Fascinating. Okay, what about discuss? That feels less negative.
Well, the semantic core here is actually shaking and separating.
It's shaking.
Yes, it comes from Latin discutere, which originally meant dash to pieces and then later evolved to investigate.
So if we discuss a topic, we're literally shaking it apart to examine its different pieces. That's a fantastic visual for a deep dive like this.
Indeed it is. When you discuss something, you're metaphorically breaking it down, analyzing its components, much like a physical object being shaken apart to reveal its inner workings. It's a vigorous analytical process, not just, polite conversation.
I like that, shaking it apart. And disseminate, that word immediately paints a picture for me. Seeds, right?
Exactly. From Latin semen, seed, where dis means abroad or widely, it paints such a clear picture of scattering information like seeds over a wide area, letting it spread far and wide, taking root wherever it lands.
It's a really powerful
It's
metaphor.
a very organic and powerful metaphor for spreading knowledge or ideas, isn't it? It's not just sharing, it's broadcasting for growth. Then we have dissident, literally meaning sitting apart.
Sitting apart.
From Latin, dissident, sitting apart, disagreeing, from sedere, sit. It perfectly describes someone who holds opinions apart from the majority or established authority, choosing to sit separately from the prevailing viewpoint.
Their position is defined by being separate.
Precisely. Their physical or metaphorical position is literally defined by their separation.
Disgrace is another one that feels very intuitive with the reversal meaning. like taking away grace.
You got it. It comes from Italian disgrazia, combining disgracial and Latin gratia, grace. The early English sense was spoil the grace of, evolving to shame or dishonor.
Yeah.
It's the stripping away of grace or favor, turning something beautiful or honorable into its opposite. It's the undoing of honor, a fall from grace in the most literal sense.
Right. And disgust. It seems related to taste.
Yes, directly. From French disgust or Italian disgusto, where disgust expresses a reversal of gustus, taste. It means strong distaste.
Okay.
Interestingly, this word and its cognates words related by common origin, like cousin words in different languages, appear relatively late after 1600 and aren't found in Shakespeare.
Really? No disgust in Shakespeare.
Not that specific word, no. This points perhaps to a specific period of linguistic adoption and maybe evolving concepts of revulsion, suggesting perhaps a shift in how societies articulated intense aversion around that time.
So the concept of disgust, as we understand it now, is relatively modern. Fascinating.
Okay.
And then the surprising one you mentioned earlier, disgruntle, where dis acts as an intensifier.
Yes, this is a fun one. It's paired with the dialect verb gruntle, meaning utter little grunts.
Gruntle. Never heard that on its own.
It's quite archaic now. But vocal displeasure, those little grunts, is strongly associated with being disgruntled. The dis makes that displeasure all the more potent and pronounced.
So you're not ungruntling.
No, you're intensely grumbling or showing deep dissatisfaction. It's a fantastic example of a prefix that typically negates actually being used to amplify a meaning. It's an interesting quirk of English, showing how prefixes can be playful as well as logical, hinting at the dynamic nature of word formation.
Language having a bit of fun. Okay, moving now to Greek roots. We have dia for through or across, and dis for bad or difficult, often seen in medical terms, right?
Exactly. These Greek roots bring a whole new flavor and precision to the D words, especially in scientific and medical contexts. They often feel a bit more technical.
Yeah, they do.
Indeed. Take diaspora, a powerful term meaning a large group of people living away from their homeland. It's a Greek word from diasporein, disperse, with dia meaning across and spirein, scatter. It literally means a scattering across.
It's a beautiful, if often sad, image, the idea of scattering across, often under duress. And you mentioned its origin in ancient texts before.
Yes, this term originated in the Septuagint, a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, specifically in Deuteronomy 28.25 to describe the scattering of the Jews. Thou shalt be a dispersion in all kingdoms of the earth. It highlights how ancient religious texts can coin enduring terms for broader human experiences, transcending their original specific context to describe universal phenomena of migration, displacement, and cultural perseverance. It connects profoundly to the human experience of forced migration across history.
A word with immense weight.
Okay.
And diatribe. That sounds negative.
It is now, but its origin is interesting. From Greek diatribe, spending of time, discourse, from dia through and tribene to rub.
Rub, like rubbing something.
Yes, tribene is to rub. Early English use was a critical dissertation, so literally rubbing through a topic, like wearing it down with argument.
Maybe. It's interesting how rubbing through a topic in discourse, like thoroughly examining it or even grinding it down with argument, evolved into its modern sense of a violent criticism of a person or work.
Right. The intensity clearly increased over time. What might have started as a rigorous, perhaps argumentative discussion transformed into something much more vitriolic and forceful, a relentless verbal attack that rubs someone the wrong way, you could say.
Definitely rubs them the wrong way. Okay, diagnose. That one seems pretty medical. You mentioned it's a back formation.
Yes, the verb diagnose was actually created later, likely in the 19th century, by taking away what seemed like a suffix from the noun diagnosis, which itself appeared earlier around the 17th century.
Oh, okay.
Diagnosis comes from Greek diagnoskain, distinguish, discern, combining diapart and gignoskain, recognize, know. So to diagnose is to know something by discerning its separate components.
Like seeing through the symptoms to the root cause.
It's precisely that act of seeing through or seeing apart the symptoms to the underlying condition, distinguishing the various elements to gain knowledge and pinpoint a problem. It's about taking something complex, breaking it apart, and understanding its distinct pieces.
Makes sense. And then quite directly, we have terms like dysentery.
Oof, yes, very descriptive. From Greek dysenteria, literally afflicted in the bowels, combining dis, bad, and entera, bowels.
Doesn't leave much to the imagination. Beyond the literal discomfort, does the starkness of dysentery or dyspepsia reveal anything about how ancient cultures perceived ailments, maybe?
That's a great question. While direct cultural perceptions might require deeper historical dives, the etymology itself shows a very direct, unadorned approach to naming ailments based on their symptoms and the suffering they caused. They weren't mincing words.
No.
Similarly, dyspepsia refers to difficult digestion, combining bad and peptos digestion. These medical terms are straightforward examples of disindicating something as problematic or malfunctioning. They show how ancient Greek medical knowledge directly influenced our modern English medical vocabulary, with the prefixes clearly conveying the nature of the ailment in a universally understood way.
There's a certain, maybe, brutal efficiency to these direct descriptions that has endured for millennia.
Well put. Brutal efficiency.
Okay, beyond prefixes, some D words have simply gone on a wild journey of meaning, haven't they? Starting in one place and ending up somewhere completely different. It's like they packed a suitcase for one destination and ended up on a different continent entirely. These are the words that truly surprise you, I think.
These are often the most fascinating words because they tell a story of cultural shifts, changing perceptions, or even just, random linguistic evolution.
Yeah.
They highlight the fluid nature of language and how it responds to the changing world around us, often holding echoes of forgotten beliefs or attitudes.
Let's start with a pair that actually flipped their meaning, or close to it. From mild to mad and beyond, take daft.
Daft.
Old English gedeft meant mild, meek. It's Germanic, related to Gothic gabadon, become or befitting. That sounds pretty tame, almost gentle, wouldn't you say? Nothing like its modern usage.
Not at all. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
The sense lacking intelligence, silly, arose in Middle English. This is a comparable development to the word silly, which, as you might know, moved from defenseless, innocent, or even blessed to foolish.
Right, silly is another good one.
What's remarkable about daft is that it often carries a notion of indulgence or playfulness, maybe stemming from its early semantic core of inoffensive. Think of Robert Burns's line, "in a frolic daft."
Ah, okay. Playful foolishness.
Exactly. This word literally flipped its meaning from gentle and fitting to foolish, but often with a lighthearted or endearing quality still attached. It's not usually a harsh condemnation of stupidity, it's more about a charming, slightly absurd foolishness, showcasing a nuanced evolution rather than a complete inversion.
So it's not just foolish, it's a sweet foolishness, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have dull. So dull actually has roots in madness.
Yeah.
That's surprising.
It is, isn't it? Old English dull meant stupid. It's Germanic, related to Dutch dull, crazy, and German toll, mad. Fantastic, wonderful.
Wow. Wonderful even.
Yes, toll in German can mean great or fantastic now, though it shares that mad root. That's quite a lineage for a word we now associate primarily with boredom or lack of excitement.
So how did it get from mad or stupid to just boring?
Well, it seems to be a semantic widening. The core idea of something being off or not sharp moved from a mental state like madness or stupidity to a lack of excitement or vibrancy. A dull knife, a dull person, dull weather. They all share that absence of sharpness, vivacity, or intellectual keenness.
Ah, the lack of sharpness.
Okay. It highlights how a core abstract quality can be applied across vastly different contexts. To call someone dull today is quite an insult, linking them, perhaps unconsciously, to that ancient sense of stupidity, yet its connection to mad or crazy is almost entirely lost to most speakers.
Yeah, you wouldn't think of it. Okay, now for some truly surprising origins of familiar concepts, let's talk about daisy. It's like a cheerful word.
It is, and its origin is lovely. Old English dage's age literally meant day's eye.
Day's eye.
Day's eye, why? Because the flower opens in the morning and closes at night, literally concealing its yellow disc, like an eye opening and closing with the day.
Oh, that's beautiful. This is a perfect example of nature-inspiring poetry and language, isn't it?
It really is. It's a direct, almost childlike observation turned into an enduring name. It speaks to a time when people had a much closer, more intimate relationship with the natural world and named things based on observable phenomena. The word itself is a tiny poem.
It is. And then it gives us the evocative idiom push up daisies to mean be in one's grave.
The contrast.
As seen in Wilfred Owen's poems where he writes, pushing up daisies is their creed. What a poignant, almost morbid shift from a sunny, cheerful flower to a grim euphemism for death.
It's the cycle of life and death literally embedded in the word and its common phrases. A beautiful, simple name taking on such a dark yet universally understood connotation for mortality.
Quite the contrast indeed. And following that botanical theme, dandelion, another common flower.
Yes, and another one named from observation. This plant name comes from French dent de lion.
Sounds like tooth of lion.
Exactly, which is itself a direct translation of medieval Latin dens leonis, both meaning lion's tooth. This is, of course, due to the jagged shape of the plant's leaves.
Ah, the serrated edges.
Precisely. You can almost see the lion's teeth in those serrated edges once you know the origin, giving a surprisingly fierce name to a seemingly innocuous yellow flower, often considered a weed.
Lion's tooth. I'll never look at them the same way. Okay, dashboard. When you hear dashboard, you immediately think of the control panel in a car, right?
Yeah.
All the dials and screens.
Absolutely. Speedometer, fuel gauge, the works.
But this mid-19th century compound word was originally a board or leather apron on the front of a vehicle, like a horse-drawn carriage.
A carriage? What for?
Its literal purpose was to stop mud from being splashed or dashed by the horse's heels into the interior and onto the driver.
Oh, to stop the dash of mud.
Exactly.
This is a classic case of technological evolution influencing language, but with a deeper insight, perhaps. The term was then transferred to the control panel in motor vehicles at the beginning of the 20th century.
It's just carried over.
It's a perfect illustration of how words adapt, retaining their functional core protection from a dash, while their literal reference shifts completely due to innovation. The function of protecting the occupants from the dash remains, but the dash itself changes from mud kicked up by horses to the data and controls that might dash or confuse a driver if not well organized.
That's a clever way to think about it. Protecting from the dash of information overload.
Perhaps. It's a constant process of linguistic recycling, showing how words maintain a functional core even as their literal reference transform with technology.
Amazing. Okay, doll. This one's a bit shocking.
It can be.
When it first appeared in the mid-16th century, doll first denoted mistress.
Yes, a mistress.
As a pet form of the given name Dorothy.
That's right, like Molly for Mary or Hal for Henry, Doll for Dorothy.
So, Dorothy was a common name for mistresses, maybe, or just the pet name became associated.
It seems the pet name itself, doll, became a term for a mistress or paramour. Then, the sense small model of a human figure, a child's toy, only dates from the late 17th century, replacing earlier terms like puppet and puppet.
So Dorothy, a mistress, then a child's toy. That's quite the transformation, wouldn't you say?
It certainly is. It speaks to how personal names can become generalized terms and how cultural shifts influence the very nature of objects and their representation in language. Perhaps the diminutiveness implied by pet form allowed it to transition easily to a small toy, but the mistress connection is truly unexpected and fascinating for most people.
Definitely raises an eyebrow. And dollar. This word, so central to global finance, where does it come from? Seems very American.
Well, its roots are European. It originated in the mid-16th century from early Flemish or Low German Daler, which was short for Joachimsdaler.
Joachimsdaler, that's a mouthful.
It is. This was a coin from the silver mine of Joachimsthal, which means Joachim's Valley, now called Jakimov in the Czech Republic.
The U.S. dollar is named after a valley in the Czech Republic.
Indirectly, yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it shows how economic and geographical realities are deeply embedded in our currency terms. The Joachimsdaler coin was known for its consistent silver content and became very popular. The name, shortened to thaler or deller, was applied to similar large silver coins, including one used in the Spanish-American colonies. This Spanish dollar, also known as a piece of 8, was widely used in the British North American colonies at the time of the American War of Independence.
Because there wasn't enough British currency.
Exactly, or it was just readily available and trusted. So when the U.S. needed its own monetary unit in the late 18th century, dollar was the familiar and accepted term.
Wow. From a Czech silver mine to Wall Street.
It's a testament to a specific silver mine in Central Europe having a global linguistic and economic impact, underscoring how deeply history and geography shape our everyday vocabulary.
Incredible journey. Okay, dunce. This is a truly unfair word history, isn't it?
Oh, profoundly unfair. One of the most linguistically unjust stories, perhaps.
Yes. In the early 16th century, dunce was an epithet for a follower of John Duns Scotus. Tell us about him.
John Duns Scotus was a highly respected Scottish scholastic theologian and philosopher in the late 13th, early 14th century. His works were complex, subtle, and widely used as university textbooks for centuries. His followers were known as Scotists or Dunsmen.
So he was a major intellectual figure. His followers were experts.
Absolutely. The Scotists were predominant in universities until the 16th century when the intellectual climate shifted with the Renaissance and Reformation. Humanists and reformers attacked and ridiculed the scholastics, including the Scotists, for making what they saw as overly subtle, pedantic, or useless distinctions in their arguments.
So a dunce was originally an expert, a prominent intellectual who was just on the wrong side of a philosophical or theological debate.
Precisely. Talk about a smear campaign. The Dunsmen spoke out against the new learning of the Renaissance, defending their scholastic methods. Because their arguments were complex and perhaps seen as resistant to newer, simpler approaches, the name duns, or dunce, became synonymous with hair splitter, someone overly pedantic.
Okay, so first hair splitter.
Then, that concept of splitting hairs, of being overly meticulous in a way that was seen as unproductive by the new thinkers, led to a notion of obstinacy, an unwillingness to accept new ideas.
Stubborn.
Yes. And finally, from that perceived obstinacy, the word came to mean a person impervious to learning, someone incapable of grasping even simple things.
Wow. From leading theologian to the symbol of stupidity.
That's quite a fall from grace, and a stark example of how intellectual and political rivalries can permanently alter the meaning of a word, turning a once respected name into a universal insult. It's a powerful lesson in how language can be weaponized.
Truly weaponized. Okay, now let's look at words that shifted from Lord's power to something more ominous, like fatal outcome. First, danger.
Danger. Middle English. From Old French danger, which itself is based on Latin dominus, lord.
Lord. How does Lord become danger?
The original sense of danger was jurisdiction or power of a lord or master, specifically the power to harm.
Ah, the power to harm.
Yes. To be in someone's danger was to be under their control, subject to their whims, which could include punishment or harm.
So it wasn't just general risk, it was risk from a specific authority figure.
Initially, yes. This raises an important question. How did a word for a lord's authority come to mean a potential for harm in such a general sense? It's fascinating how the concept of power over others directly transmuted into the power to cause harm, which is our modern sense.
So the negative potential of power took over.
It seems so. If a lord had danger over you, it meant they had the power to protect you or to inflict harm. Over time, the negative aspect of that power, the threat it posed, became the dominant meaning, highlighting perhaps a societal focus on the negative implications of unchecked power.
Interesting perspective. Okay, decimate. We hear this used pretty loosely today.
Very loosely, almost always hyperbolically.
But its origin is specific and quite dark.
Yep.
Latin decimate, from the verb decimer, take as a tenth.
Exactly. Originally, and quite chillingly, it alluded to the Roman military punishment of executing 1 man in 10 of a mutinous legion, chosen by lot.
1 in 10. Brutal.
Extremely. In Middle English, it was also used for levying a tithe, which is a 10th part for the church. And later, Cromwell imposed a decimation tax, a 10% tax, on royalists in 1655.
So it always had that 1/10 meaning.
Historically, yes. So if you say an industry was decimated, you are literally, etymologically, implying that exactly 9 out of 10 survived or 1 in 10 was lost.
Which is almost never what people mean now.
Almost never. Today, we use it for a general sense of severe reduction, often meaning a huge proportion, a majority, or almost all are destroyed or lost. It's a prime example of a word softening, or perhaps more accurately, exaggerating its original intense meaning. It's become a hyperbolic term for widespread destruction rather than a precise, calculated reduction of exactly 10%.
This linguistic softening or exaggeration seems common.
It is. Meanings drift, often towards hyperbole or generalization.
Okay, dungeon. I always picture a dark, underground cell.
That's the modern meaning, yes. But in Middle English, a dungeon was originally a castle keep, the main, strongest tower of a castle.
A keep, the safest part.
Exactly. As well as a dark vault for confinement, often located within or beneath that keep. It comes from Old French donjon, possibly meaning Lord's Tower. It's essentially a doublet of dominion.
A doublet. Meaning
they both evolved from the same ancient root in this case, related to Latin dominus, lord, but took different paths phonetically and semantically to their modern meanings. They became linguistic siblings that sound quite different now, dungeon and dominion.
So the highest, most powerful part of the castle, the lord's domain, the dungeon or keep, becomes associated with the lowest, most confined space for prisoners, the dungeon.
That's a truly ironic twist of fate for a word, isn't it? It reflects a fascinating semantic shift, from a place of power and authority to a place of utter powerlessness and confinement, both physically located within the same fortified structure. It speaks volumes about the duality inherent in power and control.
Wow, from the top to the bottom. And finally for this section, draconian. We use this for overly harsh laws or rules.
Yes, excessively harsh. It's a relatively recent adjective dating from the late 19th century, but it comes directly from the Greek name Drakon.
Drakon. Who was he?
Draco was an Athenian legislator in the 7th century BC. He codified the laws of Athens, and his legal code was notorious for its extreme severity.
How severe.
The death penalty was apparently imposed for even trivial crimes, like stealing a cabbage. There's a saying that his laws were written not in ink, but in blood.
Written in blood. Okay, that explains draconian.
It does. This highlights how historical figures, even those from antiquity, can cast such a long shadow on our language, their names becoming bywords for specific qualities. The name Draco became synonymous with extreme, unforgiving punishment due to the sheer severity of his legal code.
Like boycott or sandwich. Named after people.
Exactly. It encourages critical thinking about the enduring impact of historical policies and individual actions on our vocabulary and collective memory. It's a linguistic monument to harshness, derived directly from one man's reputation.
Finally, let's explore those delightful aha moments where words you thought were entirely unrelated actually share surprising roots, or where common idioms reveal unexpected linguistic ingenuity.
Yes, the hidden threads connecting different parts of the lexicon.
These are the verbal high fives, where language winks at you and reveals its cleverness, showing off its hidden connections. It's like finding secret passages in the dictionary.
I like that analogy. These connections often reveal deeper cultural assumptions or forgotten histories, adding layers of meaning to our everyday expressions. They show how language is a living, breathing entity, constantly evolving, surprising us, and playing subtle tricks.
Let's start with the hand of skill and appearance. Talk about dab, like a dab hand.
Right. Dab itself seems symbolic of a light, quick striking movement, a quick touch. This lightness of touch gets translated metaphorically into expertise or skill. The phrase dab hand, meaning an expert at something, is recorded from the 1820s. But the element dab used to mean expert was apparently in use even before 1700.
So being good at something was like having a light, quick touch.
It seems so. It might even be related etymologically to adept or perhaps even dapper. You're literally doing something with a quick, light, skilled touch, like a painter applying a small dab of color with precision.
Okay. And speaking of dapper, where does that fit? It means neatly dressed now, usually.
Yes. Neat, smart, trim. It probably comes from a Middle Low German or Middle Dutch word meaning strong, stout, sturdy.
Strong. That's different.
Quite different. In early English use, it was appreciative, describing someone vigorous or sturdy. But now it's sometimes used humorously, or at least very specifically, for a neatly dressed, often small person. The physical strength seems to have been replaced by a neat, almost precise appearance.
So it shifted from strong body to sharp clothes.
In a way, yes. Maybe that neatness implies a kind of precision or sharpness that replaced the older sense of physical strength. It's a shift from muscular strength to sartorial precision.
Interesting shift. Then there's dexterity, skill with the hands, usually.
Yes, skill and adroitness, particularly with the hands. It originated in the early 16th century, but its first sense, interestingly, was mental adroitness, skillful thinking.
Mental skill first.
It comes from French dexterité, ultimately from Latin dexter, meaning on the right or right hand.
Right hand, why the right hand?
Well, what's fascinating here is the ancient and widespread association of the right hand with skill, cleverness, and correctness across various cultures and languages. It's deeply embedded in the etymology of dexterity.
Like how right also means correct.
Exactly. And think about how sinister, which now means evil or ominous, comes from the Latin sinister, meaning left or left hand.
Wow. So there's a historical bias against left-handedness built right into the words.
It certainly seems so. It's a profound cultural bias woven into the very fabric of our language, connecting physical attributes right versus left to moral and intellectual qualities like skillfulness versus nefariousness. It reflects a widespread historical preference for the right side.
That's quite a revelation hidden in dexterity. Okay, let's move to everyday objects and their evolution. We have dock, 3 distinct origins that sound exactly the same. A real homonym trap.
Yes, a triple threat.
Right.
First, dock as in a port where ships moor. That comes from Middle Dutch or Middle Low German, but its ultimate origin is unknown.
Okay, the ship dock. And number 2.
Then dock, as in the enclosure in a criminal court where a defendant stands. That appeared in the late 16th century. It was probably originally slang, and it seems related to a Flemish word dock, meaning chicken coop.
A chicken coop.
Yep.
Seriously, like the defendant is cooped up.
That seems to be the implication, confined in a small space.
Okay. And the third dock.
The third dock refers to the solid, fleshy part of an animal's tail. From that noun, we get the verb sense to cut short an animal's tail.
Like docking a dog's tail.
Exactly. And that verb sense later generalized to mean reduce, deduct, like docking someone's pay. This one dates from late Middle English and is perhaps related to a Frisian word dock, meaning bunch or bundle.
So port, courtroom coop, and tail stump. All dock.
All dock. It's remarkable how the same sounds can emerge from completely unrelated etymological paths, creating these linguistic homonyms that can easily trip us up. Yet each carries its own unique, often vivid history. It's a testament to the unpredictable nature of sound and meaning convergence.
Wild. And dish. Old English displate. Shallow vessel. Based on Latin discus. Seems straightforward, right? A simple eating utensil. Like a discus shape.
Pretty much from the shape. But here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit playful.
Go on.
The slang use of dish to refer to an attractive person, as in what a dish, dates from the beginning of the 20th century.
Ah, like a tasty dish.
Exactly. It's comparable to how delicious is used informally for sexual appeal. It suggests that someone attractive is so appealing they're almost edible, a feast for the eyes. It's a playful sensory metaphor that has surprisingly long staying power in informal speech. Still hear it sometimes.
What a dish. Okay. From sleep to work and play, dormant. Sounds like sleeping.
It does, and it is, late Middle English. Meanings include fixed in position, like a heraldic animal lying down, and latent or inactive. It comes directly from an old French word meaning sleeping, from the verb dormir, from Latin dormire, to sleep.
And dormitory comes from that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A dormitory is quite literally a sleeping place. It's a very direct lineage from the act of sleeping, dormire, to the state of being inactive or latent, dormant, perfectly encapsulated by that Latin root.
So when something is dormant, it's not dead.
No, not necessarily. It's merely resting, inactive, awaiting a time to awaken or become active again. This connection highlights the concept of potentiality, of life or activity temporarily paused, whether it's a dormant volcano, dormant seeds, or even dormant talent.
Okay. And then we have do, doff, don, simple actions with deep roots and a fascinating linguistic reduction.
Very neat examples. Do itself is fundamental. Old English don, Germanic origin, related way back to Greek to themi place, and Latin facere, make do.
Basic action verb.
The most basic, maybe. But doff, from late Middle English, is a clever contraction of the phrase do off.
Do off.
Meaning to take off, specifically clothing, to doff your hat.
Do off becomes doff.
Exactly. And similarly, don, also late Middle English, is a contraction of do on.
To put on. To don your coat.
Precisely. To put on clothing.
The elegance of language, reducing two-word phrases to single, potent verbs. It's like a linguistic shortcut, isn't it?
It absolutely is, streamlining expression. It shows how language constantly seeks efficiency, distilling common actions into compact forms, yet preserving the original meaning clearly for centuries. It's a linguistic fast-forward button for common action.
Love it. And doodles. We all doodle, right? Scribbling absently.
Often while on the phone or in a boring meeting.
But it didn't start there, did it? Originally, in the early 17th century, a doodle was a noun denoting a fool.
A simpleton.
Yes, a fool or a simpleton. Later, as a verb, it meant make a fool of, cheat. The origin is Low German Judeltopf, simpleton.
So how did we go from a simpleton to sketching absently on paper? That seems like a big jump.
It does. This raises an important question. How did a word for a fool shift to meaning scribbling in an absent-minded way by the 1930s? It's not entirely clear, but it suggests a possible connection being made between idle behavior, especially idle hands engaged in seemingly pointless activity, and foolishness or thoughtlessness. So, because doodling looks unproductive, it got linked to being simple-minded.
That's one plausible theory. The act of doodling, which is often seen as unproductive or indicative of a wandering mind, might have become associated with the earlier sense of being a simpleton or engaging in trivial, unthinking activity. It's a charming, if slightly judgmental, example of a word evolving from a type of person to an action associated with that type.
Interesting potential connection. Okay, let's talk about figurative expressions that really stick in our language. Idioms starting with D. or featuring D words, a drop in the ocean or a drop in the bucket.
Right. Both phrases mean an infinitesimally small or insignificant part compared to the whole. A negligible amount. Drop in the bucket seems to be the earlier expression, found in the Bible, actually.
Ah, biblical.
Yes, Isaiah 40.45 talks about nations being as a drop of a bucket. But we find the first recorded example with ocean in Dickens's A Christmas Carol.
Dickens again?
Yes, where Scrooge's Ghost of Christmas Past says something like, "The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business."
Wow. It illustrates how influential authors can popularize and cement idioms in common usage, perhaps shifting the preferred phrasing of an established idea, bucket to ocean, and giving it a fresh, memorable lease on life. Dickens truly had a way with words that resonated and stuck.
He certainly did. Another biblical one, shake the dust off one's feet.
Yes, that expression has a very clear biblical allusion, referencing Matthew 10.14, where Jesus instructs his disciples, if a town rejects them, to leave and shake the dust off their feet as a testimony against them.
So it symbolizes abandonment or rejection?
Exactly. It signifies a complete disavowal, leaving a place or situation behind with nothing more to do with it, as if even its dust is contaminating and needs to be removed. It carries a moral weight, a judgment of the place or people being abandoned, a definitive gesture.
Very definitive. Okay, dyed in the wool. What does that actually refer to?
This refers literally to the process of dyeing wool. The coloring process is more thorough, more permanent, when the dye is applied to the raw, unprocessed wool fibers before spinning, rather than dyeing the yarn or the finished cloth. Ah, so the color goes deeper.
Exactly. It permeates the very fiber. So, figuratively, dyed in the wool means deeply ingrained, thorough, unchangeable. Usually applied to opinions or allegiances, a dyed-in-the-wool traditionalist, for example. Their beliefs are fundamental to their being, not just surface level.
That's a great visual for something inherent and unalterable. And Doubting Thomas, everyone knows this one.
A classic, used from the early 17th century for someone skeptical who refuses to believe something without direct personal proof, especially physical proof.
And it comes straight from
the Bible again. It's a direct allusion to the Apostle Thomas, who famously said he wouldn't believe Christ had risen from the dead until he could see and touch the nail wounds in his hands and the wound in his side. John chapter 20.
Right. Seeing is believing for Thomas.
It shows how powerful and pervasive these biblical stories became, providing readily understood shorthand for complex personality traits or skeptical attitudes. You immediately understand the character type implied by a Doubting Thomas.
Definitely. We also mentioned earlier In a Frolic Daft, that example from Robert Burns.
Yes, illustrating that earlier sense of daft, meaning playful or innocently foolish, connecting back beautifully to our earlier discussion about that word's surprising trajectory from meek to foolish.
And some more modern slang. What's the damage?
Ah, yes. Where damage means cost, right? Usually the cost of a meal or a round of drinks. That slang usage dates from the mid-18th century.
Mid-18th. That's surprisingly old for slang.
Some slang sticks around. It implies an informal, perhaps slightly rueful tallying of the cost, the damage done to one's wallet, often after some kind of indulgence.
Makes sense. Main drag.
The slang use of drag meaning main street of a town or city, that's found from the mid-19th century.
Why drag?
It likely derives from the verb drag, meaning to draw or pull. The main street is the place people are drawn to, or that drags traffic through the center of town. It's the central thoroughfare that pulls people along.
Okay. And related perhaps in drag.
Meaning wearing clothing typically associated with the opposite sex, usually men wearing women's clothes. That slang dates from the end of the 19th century. Its origin is debated. Some connect it to the idea of long skirts dragging on the floor in theatrical contexts. Others suggest different origins. It's a bit murky.
Interesting. And a fun one to maybe end on. The exclamation, "What the deuce?" Where does deuce come from there?
Deuce here is a euphemism for the devil.
The bevel.
Yes. Dating from the mid-17th century, it likely originates from the gaming term deuce, meaning the two on dice or cards. In dicing, throwing 2 ones, snake eyes, or perhaps 2 twos, was considered the worst possible throw. Very unlucky.
So the lowest throw got linked to bad luck and then the devil.
Exactly. It became associated with ill luck, misfortune, and by extension, the devil. So what the deuce is a softened expletive, using a gaming term associated with bad luck to express exasperation or surprise, avoiding stronger, more blasphemous language, a clever linguistic workaround.
A very polite way to curse. #tag outro.
So we've really only taken a dip into the vast ocean of words beginning with D, haven't we? But hopefully this deep dive has given you a fresh perspective on the dynamic and often surprising nature of language itself.
It really has.
Each word, you realize, is potentially a microcosm of history, culture, and human ingenuity.
From ancient Roman punishments like decimation to modern slang like main drag, from biblical allusions like doubting Thomas to architectural elements like dungeons and dashboards, the stories behind these words are incredibly rich. It's a powerful reminder, I think, that every word carries a hidden history waiting patiently to be uncovered. There's like these little linguistic archaeological digs happening right inside our everyday conversations.
That's a great way to put it. And knowledge is most valuable when understood and applied, right? Understanding these origins can profoundly deepen your appreciation for how we communicate. It can even encourage critical thinking about the subtle layers of meaning embedded in everyday speech, allowing you to see the echoes of the past, ancient beliefs, historical events, technological changes resonating in the present.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? Well, next time you use a word starting with D, maybe you'll pause for just a second and consider its incredible journey. What other seemingly ordinary words, maybe not even starting with D, might hold such extraordinary tales of transformation and connection, just waiting for you to discover? The deep dive into language is truly endless, isn't it? A constant source of wonder.
It truly is. There's always more to learn, and looking at things from multiple perspectives, like etymology, usage, history, it truly enriches understanding, opening up new pathways in your mind.
Absolutely. Well, join us next time for another deep dive into the fascinating world of words.